This is my 127th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge, and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my lengthy series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. In this part I'll be revisiting the kit-built Royal Scot locomotive that previously featured in part 121, which covered several handcrafted locomotive models. This model needed some additional work, notably the traction tyres on the tender needed to be replaced, and that's what I'll be dealing with in this video, finishing with some running after all of the fixes. This is how the loco came to me after purchase on eBay UK. Quite a nice looking model, if perhaps a little heavily weathered. Several parts came off in transit. The first that I noticed was the fireman, who was floating around loose in the box. This model was a bit of a Frankenstein. The main body parts were from a Crown Line kit for a Royal Scot as originally built, with the parallel boiler and single chimney, although this model does have smoke deflectors which were added later. The body parts from the kit have been fitted onto the chassis of an Airfix rebuilt Royal Scot. This applied to both the tender and the loco, and this model is tender driven. Here you can see the markings on the bottom of the loco chassis. Airfix Products Limited 1977, made in Hong Kong. Here's the bottom of the driving tender as it came. The wheels are plastic and all 6 have traction tyres fitted to them. All pickup is from the loco, with power passed to the motor in the tender via the wires seen at right here. As you can see, the traction tyres that came on the model were not in good shape. They were hard and dried up and starting to crack apart, quite probably the originals that were fitted in 1977. I refitted the fireman to the cab alongside the driver. Then I found one set of the front steps on the floor where I'd unpacked the model, so I glued those on again. I also had to do quite a bit of work cleaning and lubricating the loco wheels and axles to get them to run freely, and the valve motion and connecting rods, etc., as everything was totally gummed up when the model arrived. And the loco was now ready for its initial running, which was featured in part 121. But I thought that I really should replace those traction tyres. I contacted Nigel with British Model Trains in Cambridge, Ontario about this, as he would definitely be my best local resource for this. Otherwise, I would have just had to try to order tyres that should be appropriate and pay the shipping from the UK to myself in Canada. Nigel said that he was sure he'd be able to replace the tyres, but it would be best to bring the model to him so that he could try a couple of possible alternatives. So I got the model ready to take to Nigel for a tyre fitting. For this, of course, I needed to remove the tender body. This was made more difficult by the fact that it appeared that the original maker of this model had glued the tabs at the back of the tender body into their slots. Why? Anyway, I did manage to remove the tender body, and then I undid the 2 screws holding on the weight and holding the motor mount to the chassis, so now the motor mount could be dropped from the chassis to provide access to the wheels for tyre fitting. I didn't totally remove the motor mount and wheels, as would have been most convenient, because the wires passing power from the loco were soldered to the motor brush mounts, and I really didn't want to unsolder them and then have to solder them back. Here's the base of the driving tender after Nigel fitted new traction tyres. He tried a couple of types in order to find a type that would fit well into the grooves in the wheels, gripping tightly and not sticking up too far. I now had a couple of additional problems to deal with when I brought the model back. When I removed the tender body, I broke off the tabs at the back. I basically had no choice, as there was no other way to get the body off, since the tabs were firmly glued in place. Here you can see the broken off ends of the tabs at right still firmly glued into the chassis, and at left you can see where the tabs were broken off from the body. These tabs are not supposed to be glued in place, they're supposed to just clip into the chassis and to be removable. Mind you, you'll often find that tabs of this kind have been broken off anyway, as they're rather fragile and get broken when the tender body is taken off and put back on, even when they're not glued into the slots. The screw holding the front of the tender body in place didn't seem to be gripping well, so I thought I might need to replace it. The original screw is at top and a slightly larger possible replacement that I fished out at bottom. At top left is the weird little drawbar piece with pin that fits into the front of the tender and hooks into a similar piece with a hole coming out of the back of the loco. This is a custom arrangement of the model builder. Airfix originally just fitted a single continuous drawbar. Here's the tender chassis with the motor and the weight. The screws that hold the weight in place at front and back also fix the motor mount with the wheels to the chassis frame. I could put the weight back on and fix the motor mount and chassis frame together without a problem, but then there was an issue with reattaching the tender body as the tabs at the back were broken, so the body would only be attached by the single screw at the front and the back would tend to rattle around. I figured that I should be able to hold the back of the tender body in place using a sort of brass spring, as I'd seen others do in videos online, although I must admit I didn't quite recall how they did it. I tried a strip of brass under the back of the weight. It stuck out a bit too far at the back when pressed up against the fitting for the screw retaining the weight. I made a cutout in the brass strip to allow it to sit a bit further forward. With the cutout set round the screw fitting, I cut the brass sheet with a pair of surgical scissors that I picked up cheap at a local surplus store. With the brass strip fitted under the weight, now far enough forward to allow the back of the tender body to sit down properly, I cut the strip to length so that an amount less than the height of the back of the tender body protruded on each side of the weight. Then I bent the side parts up around the weight. I actually needed to use some small pliers to bend the ends in a bit more than this before I could fit the tender body. With the back of the tender body fitted around the brass strips, their natural tendency to spring out held it in place quite well, and I was able to refit the front screw with the drawbar piece pivoted on the fitting for that screw. I tried the running of the motor on the bench before taking the loco up to the layout. It did basically work okay, though pickup from the loco wheels wasn't terribly reliable. I tried to clean things a bit again, but I never did get pickup to be really consistent. I'd try a wheel and it wouldn't work, and then I'd try it again and it would work. When I took the model up to the layout and tried to couple it to some coaches, the vestigial coupling that was on the back of the tender broke off. It never was a proper coupling, just a loop with no hook and not really at the right height. I fiddled around trying to see what I could fit. There wasn't really any good place at the back of the tender to mount a coupling, and details that had been fitted, pipes and a 3-link coupling, got in the way. There's a reason details of this sort are often not pre-fitted to commercial models, because they just tend to obstruct the coupling. I managed to glue a wide Bachmann coupling onto the bottom of the bar at the back of the tender with CA glue, at the expense of cutting off the base of a vacuum pipe. Here you can see the result. The vacuum pipe and the 3-link coupling are still there, but I've bodged my Bachmann coupling on under them. So now I was actually able to get the loco onto the layout and coupled up to a train. I used 3X Midland clerestory coaches that I had by the layout, perhaps not the most appropriate for a Royal Scot, though from the right period, more or less. The front and back coaches were Hornby models. The middle one was something that I built from a ratio kit. It turned out reasonably well, although the ratio chassis isn't the greatest. The wheels don't turn very freely and the couplings don't work very well. So here she is, Royal Scot Cameronian, ready for another try at running with a train.
Well, honestly, I think this is a case of no good deed going unpunished. This kit-built Royal Scot, I think, was actually running better before this whole exercise of putting new traction tyres on it than it is now. I don't know, it seems to have a variety of problems. Not least that its pickups kind of suck. It's not like any one wheel won't pick up. If I try it on the bench, I can sort of get the power to work by supplying it to any wheel. Sometimes, but then sometimes it doesn't work when I supply it to that wheel, so the pickups are sort of working erratically. So with the result that it doesn't go over points well. It's picking up from the supposedly from the 6 driving wheels of the Loco, if you're lucky. But it's picking up kind of erratically. There never was intended to be any pickup from the Tender. The Tender has traction tyres on all 6 wheels. Anyway, let's see if we can get it round. I put a new coupling on the back of it because the vestigial coupling that came with it broke off when I tried to couple it up to these coaches. See, it's not running well. It's hesitating. Anytime there's a little piece of dust or anything on the track, it hesitates. I've cleaned the track pretty darn well now, but then it still hesitates. So see, it hesitates over the point there. There's nothing much I can do about that, because there's always going to be a little dead spot on the point. They're insular points. Yeah, I know he's hesitating there. I don't know. I don't know, maybe my memory's over-optimistic. Maybe he never did run better than this. I thought he ran better than this before we started this exercise. Traction was never really a problem. You know, it's a flat layup and I'm not running heavy trains. I just put traction tyres on him. Well, because the old ones were like cracked and falling apart, so it just seemed kind to replace them. And I have replaced them now with new traction tyres. Let's see if I can pull him into the station. Well, there you go. His train is pulled into the station. I guess we missed a little bit. Well, the carriages are all on the platform, I think. The engine's gone beyond the platform. So there you go. I think that's about all we're going to do. Oh, well, maybe I'll bring him back round. Maybe I'll bring him back round into the light, because you can't see him very well back round there, can you? Okay, I'll pass the level crossing. We'll bring him back round into the light. He's a good-looking engine, I'll give him that. He is a good-looking engine. It's a very nice-looking kit. But, you know, the problem is people build these kits, but they don't seem too bothered about actually running them, it seems. And I want to run them, so I struggle with them to get them to run. But there you go. Cameronian, Royal Scot Cameronian.